Good evening. Our United States have been finding a way to stay united for over 240 years. But recent events have called that unity into question. What has caused this growing rift between us, and how do we heal a country divided? On January 6th at 12:30 p.m. Eastern Time, a large group of protesters gathered at the U.S. Capitol building in Washington, D.C. At 12:53, a smaller group of protesters overwhelmed police along the outer western perimeter of the Capitol. By 1:03, they had overrun 3 layers of barricades and had forced police officers to the base of the Capitol steps. At 1:30, Capitol Police were again forced to retreat, this time to the doors of the Capitol itself. At 1:59 came the first reports that the crowd had reached the Capitol's doors and windows and were trying to break in. And at 2:12, the first protester entered the Capitol through a broken window, opening a door and allowing hundreds to flow inside. The United States Capitol building had not been breached in over 200 years. In 1814, it was the British. This time, it was Americans, many of them veterans and active duty military. The images of that day paint a picture of a country divided and beg the questions: where is the path to unity? Where do we go from here? I'm Nathan Johnson. Welcome to Veterans Voices, a monthly television show that explores important issues that affect the veterans community.
Good evening. I'm Erin, and in this special Veterans Voices town hall meeting, our panel of veterans will discuss the events at the U.S. Capitol on January the 6th, the climate of discord that led to them, and the path ahead. I want to welcome veterans Steve Burchik, Zach Bass, Joy Santos, Brian Hamilton, Abram Wilson, Adam Williams, and Mike Hudson to the show. Welcome.
Thank you.
So, as Nathan alluded to earlier in our opening, we are all aware that we had, a significant event take place on January the 6th at the U.S. Capitol. And honestly, this is going to be an open forum this evening to kind of discuss, our own personal maybe thoughts and experiences with regards to that incident. So I'd like to open up, tonight's discussion, with a question, and it may feel a little loaded, but I definitely want to generate some good conversation and just kind of get some viewpoints from you all. So I'll start with the question. Because this was considered, a riot, the question here would be, to start off, should protesters who entered the Capitol building be charged with a crime? So I'd like to maybe hear a thought on that from any of our guests that'd like to take that.
I think they should.
Go ahead.
We'll go right in. Thank you. I absolutely think they should. People were injured, people died. That day, I was watching on a live stream former President Trump speak, and I was actually watching all of this from my hot tub in my backyard, and I watched the storming of the Capitol exactly from the same place, and I couldn't believe it was happening. I mean, was it everyone that was there? No. Was it largely peaceful? Yeah, I would argue so. But should those people that entered the building and just entered the building at all be charged? Absolutely. That's you're not supposed to be in there.
Yeah, there'll be varying degrees of charges filed, I'm sure, as they sort out the mess. I mean, you have some who conducted violent assaults, so they should be held accountable for those particular crimes that they committed. But I think there was no question in my mind, if I were there, for example, I would know that I'm doing something wrong. And I think everyone should be accountable for their particular role in that. Well, I mean, we can call it a riot, break-in, trespassing. It's been called a lot of things, but I think as they sort out the details of who did what, there should be some serious charges levied that fit the crime. Absolutely.
Well, this
I
is a good
think
question, and I think this
that-
is a good way for us to introduce to our audience that these questions are hard questions that we're asking tonight, and these panelists are sharing with us their thoughts and opinions and beliefs based on their perspective as being veterans. So we're bringing the veterans' voice to our audience tonight, and that's a tough question, but it's good to hear the perspective from some of you. I want to ask, when you witness civil unrest, such as the events on January or the events that took place several months ago, things like looting and rioting that have occurred, how does it make you feel when you watch that on television or in person? Adam, I'll start with you.
For me, I'm filled with a lot of feelings about it. One of the biggest is probably sadness. I think as a country, we are better than this. It's not always the popular, opinion, but I mean, when you look at people, generally people are good. They're pretty decent folks, just trying to get by, just trying to, do their day-to-day stuff. But when you start getting that mob mentality going and, there's extreme emotion pushing and driving situations like that. I mean, granted it happens, but I'm still sad to see in our country, one of the world's leaders, seeing this sort of stuff happen.
I agree with you. I think it somewhat feels a bit like a blemish. Dre?
Yeah, I was going to also say that, you're deeply saddened by it, especially for myself, where I came back from overseas about 2 years ago. So like many of you can experience that adjustment period of, just adjusting back to an American lifestyle and American culture. Not that you forget it, but things have changed when you were gone, when you're deployed, when you're overseas, when you're not on American soil. So when you come back home and, for myself, just very motivated, honored to serve my country, proud to be an American. And then you witness just is almost at a loss for words to how to truly describe the events that happened, not just in January, but almost the past 2 years of the injustice, the lack of accountability for people's actions. So it's just really disturbing to witness and to say that that's what Americans do. That's how we react instead of it's more of a reaction than it is being proactive. Okay, so this happened. What do we do now? Barbaric, approach to it. Why can't we be civilized? Why does it have to reach barbaric? Why do we have to rush and intrude and break in and overstep our boundaries? No one, the rules and humans make mistakes, and we're not perfect, and we can make those changes along the way, by the processes that are implemented to make those changes. But when we start to steer away from those and we start to take it on a personal level, where it's almost like a slap in the face to what we stand for.
I think civil unrest, looting, rioting is always disturbing, no matter who does it. Not necessarily just this, January 6th, but last summer and even in the months before. In most cases, I think it reflects a real deep frustration and despair felt by people who feel they've been treated badly. And that actually may be the root issue, whether it's poverty, discrimination, or a political belief that your opinion or your party or your candidates aren't being heard, reaches a boiling point. Now, there may be another issue of how that's provoked, but at that point in time, that's an expression of people feeling very deeply about a particular issue.
That's a good point to bring up, Steve. I know Mr. Abram Wilson, I believe you were trying to chime in a little earlier. I want to give you an opportunity also to kind of speak your piece as well.
You know, when I was looking at the Capitol, more than anything else, it was anger. Anger that they were doing this. And the fact that we had to even think whether or not they should be punished or not. Majority of protests are peaceful. There's always that minority that caused the fires, the riots, and things like that. But they're the ones that get the press more than anything else. You know, going through the civil rights, it was always peaceful, but there was always those other factors, and that's what the press picks up on. And that's sad. That's what we aren't Americans. That's not the American way. And I think that, you know, I think of Israel that everyone should be in the military because it teaches you how to get along with people who have different ideas and not even accept it, but somewhat tolerate it because we're all independently dependent on each other. And it's saddened that we don't have that unity here in the United States.
I want to ask, we've talked about how these events have made us feel and how we've witnessed them. How do you feel when you learned that many of the people who participated in some of the events that took place at the Capitol were veterans, or even some were members of the active duty military or the reserves?
It didn't surprise me at all because the frustration that people have coming out of the military and being thrown into this world, it's the fear factor, it's disappointment. Where do I fit? But I remember when I first, as I started, was at the very beginning, coming from San Francisco and going into Fort Bragg, North Carolina, was the first thing that said, you know, are you a member of the Black Panther? And my remark was, anyone who's been to Fort Bragg knows that sign that says, welcome to Klan country. So the first thing I said, you didn't ask them whether they were members of the Klan. I was confined to barracks for a month while they went into my background. But saying that, you get over that and you realize that we're all in this together. Again, I wasn't surprised. I wasn't surprised at the police. I wasn't surprised at the ex-military. But that is unfortunately their right to have their thoughts, but not when it interferes with the mission.
Brian, I want to bring you into this conversation. Abram has said he wasn't very surprised. I'm curious about your thoughts in tying to that the factor of the oath. You take the oath when you enter into the military to defend the Constitution. And so share with us your feelings when you learned that many of these people were veterans and how that ties, if at all, to your understanding of that oath to defend the Constitution and whether that still applies after you leave the service.
Well, okay. I wasn't surprised at all. I have a lot of friends that are definitely pro-Trump. They definitely do not like the Democratic Party. These people believe that the Democrats have it out for America. They believe that a lot of these people are corrupt. Whether they are or not, I do not know. But they believe that this happens, right? And so, I think in their mind, they're in line with their oath, right? They're not going against it. They think that they're doing their duty as citizens to defend the Constitution, even by breaking the rules. That's what I think, right? That's what I think is how they justify it to themselves. Whether they are justified or not, that's a whole different discussion. But I believe that they thought they were justified. I believe that they thought they were defending democracy and the republic.
What does that?
There's about America right now that they believe that. Where did we get that point in America that we all don't analyze the same facts and understand. Everyone has their own interpretation of facts versus reality.
Well, if I could jump in here real quick, I mean, to answer part of what you just asked, where does that come from? I truly think much of America is informed by a sort of fear porn society every time they turn on television. And you get one set of facts. If you look, and you get one set of facts over here. And how do you actually define that? Well, if you look up the actual like Webster Dictionary of propaganda, that's exactly what it is. So it's hard to discern what the actual facts are and think critically. Just about anything. I mean, almost the best thing anyone could actually do at the moment is get rid of their social medias, turn off their TV, and just live their lives. But that's also not a real reality for most people, I think.
Well, it's
I
how
think
we
they're going
label
back-
people as well. Oh, I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Mike.
I was going to say, I mean, we to add to that, really, I mean, it's how we label people, right? So we have all sorts of names. We can go over the list of, there are, if you wear a red hat and you say "Make America Great Again" or whatever, okay, you're automatically a racist to some people, right? So somebody is automatically a racist. Somebody who votes for, I don't know, throw out a candidate, not Trump, say like a Bernie supporter or somebody else. Well, there's all sorts of names for those people. A name like, there are names out there. We all know what they are, right? So people want to categorize people, and that's, there's a big media influence there because you have these people over here are bad and these people are good. And when you don't have to interact with those people because your team is good, then naturally they become an enemy. So we don't interact enough. If you want a solution to the problem, I would say I would like to see at my table in my house where there's food, right? Because we get a long table fellowship here. People with all sorts of different perspectives. I'd like to see a field of burn, sticker or see a field of burn sticker on a car in my driveway next to somebody that's wearing a MAGA hat, if people still do that sort of thing, right? And bring people together and have conversations as people rather than, what we do now and label and make distinctions between who's good and who's bad. I think that's part of the problem.
I think what I'm hearing is social media and the news have made it very easy to wrap people into some type of package and just throw them out, and rather than connect with them in the way that Mike described, connect with them and with different views. What role do you think that we play in understanding that the media has that influence on us, and particularly social media, as Zach mentioned, where things can be specifically tailored to our own opinions and beliefs based on, programs and algorithms and such? Adam, what is our role as veterans in creating a safe place rather than furthering that divide?
It's a really good question. I think that if we look back at where we kind of come from within our service, as Abram was talking about, we've dealt with we've all been in and around people from all sorts of parts of the country, city, rural, every race, color, creed, and, we're all kind of shoved together. If we can take how we kind of worked through those processes, we should be able to develop something, as Mike was talking about, to sit down, have those, intent or those big conversations in our communities and kind of get that dialogue going. I think that's where it's locals first. From there, it's just going to snowball.
Absolutely. I appreciate you sharing that perspective. We are going to be heading into another segment where we'll continue that conversation. So for now, when we come back, we'll continue this conversation with our panel of veterans. But first, we want to take a look at this month's featured Shadowbox.
Tonight's very special virtual Shadowbox belongs to Corporal Ben Griswold of 1st Battalion, 6th Marines. During combat service in Iraq, he was exposed to radiation near the Al Tawitha Nuclear Research Facility. After his honorable discharge in 2006, he developed serious health complications as a result. He lost his valiant fight on January 29th, 2021. We honor his service and dedicate this show to his memory.
Veterans are mission oriented. Now you need to be selfish. You need to take care of your future, and you need to be, for people that are volunteers, they know that they have to adhere to the mission and win. So you got to get forward and advocate for yourself. Get a battle buddy, whether it's your incredible spouse or a fellow veteran, and you need to be a victor. There's no room for waiting and watching. You gotta take that new mission and complete it.
Ben Griswold was a friend of Veterans Voices and will be missed. We did just feature him on a show recently, so we will truly, truly miss him. Welcome back to Veterans Voices for our special Veterans Voices Town Hall meeting. We're talking about the January 6th events at the U.S. Capitol and what they say about the state of unity in our United States. We'd like to continue on our conversation. We had great discussion previously, and I kind of want to open it up with just a basic question here. We've learned in the last segment that for several of you, the media alone, as we reiterated, has a lot to do with maybe how people formulate their thoughts and their opinions. And so along those lines, I'm just curious, and perhaps I can get our good friend Steve to chime in on this, but do you find it somewhat difficult, especially from a veteran's perspective, to really be able to talk things out like this and share your perspective with others?
I don't find it a problem on a one-to-one basis. I'm happy to and do engage with other people who have very different political views. The area where I find a problem is on social media, where I've got some good personal friends who have extreme views, post them, and relatively rarely come up with an original thought. What they do is repost stuff from other people. So there's this constant feed. It gets so annoying, I've had to unfriend several people. Going back to the media question that Zach mentioned earlier, yes, there is bias in some of the media. However, the important piece is there's a variety of media outlets there. There are TV stations or networks. Some are neutral, some are ultra-right, ultra-left. I try to watch 2 or 3 national broadcasts, PBS, ABC, CBS, but also CNN and Fox to kind of get a couple of other exchanges. Newspapers, I read 2 different newspapers. The newspapers themselves may have their own bias, but if you go to the editorial page, they have feature articles from other people with opposing views. So I think it's important that you have a variety of sources, evaluate them, and make your own conclusions. Don't divorce yourself from all media. Ignorance is not a solution. Over.
Absolutely. Dre, kind of tossing this your way, man. What are your thoughts?
Yes, so I think we all have this onus to just check ourselves. Are we promoting hate? Are we promoting division? Are we promoting truth and accuracy? And just like Stephen said, are we just passing and forwarding and sharing somebody else's opinion because, we like the way it looks or it sounds about right, but not really accurate? There's just a self-reflection that we need to do when we are involved in social media and voicing our opinions on there. And to each his own, how much you really use it and what you use it for. But I think as we have the ability to set the example, do the right thing. We all been trained to do that. And it just goes back to the oath that we took up in our, Nathan, I know that you're a part of that roundtable with General Mattis, where he basically talked, it's a moral code, and where do you sit with your moral code? Who's in the driver's seat and where are you driving with that? Where are your values that, and how are they reflected? How are you reflecting your values, and how are you reflecting your morals? So I think it's just a lot of self-reflection and how we want to be perceived, but making sure that we are, portraying truth, making sure that what we're saying is accurate and not just going with the flow just because.
Yeah, thank you, Dre. I agree with you. Zach, I think you had something to add to the question.
Yeah, I did. I agree with everything that Dre just said, and I wanted to respond real quickly to what Steve said. I wasn't suggesting turn off all media. Just you don't have to gather it all from cable news network. There's tons of other media resources. There's foreign media. There's tons of other independent journalists, and there's actual data that you can look at. One such example that's unrelated to the Capitol riots. I knew what was coming to the United States a year ago when they were welding people in the buildings in China. My wife and I were looking at these videos. Was it reported here in the United States? No. What was reported? What was reported is you don't have anything to worry about. There's no human-to-human transmission. All the while, they were welding people to buildings in China. So it's what echo chamber of idiocy do you want to listen to, or do you want to be your own critical thinker and search and find accurate information and then compare that to actual data that already exists? So that's what I meant by that. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for that, Zach. And in the military, I think we're used to taking what the military calls intelligence. I know that's a bit of an oxymoron to understand for some people, but taking raw information and analyzing it and trying to understand where the enemy is or where the good guys are. That's the role of intelligence. Brian, how do you approach this? And not just from the source of news, but in the source of connecting with other people. How do you described yourself as a centrist earlier? Yeah. How do you filter or expose yourself to what you may feel is a more balanced source of information?
Oh, well, I think one thing you have to do, and especially in this day and age, is that I use a word called propagandize. For instance, in this day and age, you can go and subscribe to somebody, right? We were talking about you subscribe to somebody, and that's all you hear, like an echo chamber. So one thing you have to do is try to subscribe to as many things as possible that are diverse as possible, right? So, okay, you listen to something about Donald Trump. Okay, listen to something that's against it, And yes, it might be a dichotomy, but at least you're doing that. And you have to actually try to listen. That's the hard part too, because a lot of people really don't listen. And what they're doing is that they're just trying to find ways to confirm their own bias, confirmation bias, right? They're just trying to find ways to prove their own proof. And like everyone has talked about, Stephen, you talked about that, like people on social media writing that, right? But I think one has to do is that you can't control other people, but you can control what you listen to and what you do. And that's kind of what everyone's saying here, right? One thing that I do, if I have someone that's like really trying to talk to me about like who knows what, for instance, I'll give you an example. I have a family member who loves QAnon stuff, right? Loves it. They love the conspiracy theory stuff. They love it, right? I'm like, okay, fine. Let's just talk about it. I don't know what you know. I don't know what you're reading. Show me what you're reading. I ask you questions. Where did you find that? Where did you read that? Let me see what you're looking at, because maybe you're seeing something that I'm not. The only problem is that takes up time. And so for expedience sake, I think people just, especially they don't care about it, right? They just go for the quickest thing, the easiest thing, the most acceptable thing, or the thing that is like the, if you would, the more popular opinion, right? I can attest on the school side, like academia wise, and maybe this is kind of a little bit more off topic here, but I can definitely tell there's definitely a push in academia right now that's very, 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 it's all about identity politics. It's all about, hey, what do you associate with? Who's your tribe? What's your gender, right? You go to California school and they always put, here's my pronouns, right? Because they don't want to make a mistake. People are scared of being wrong about anything. Because, man, if you're wrong about one thing, you must be wrong about everything. So people become like very closed off. So one thing you can do is just talk with people, just see what they have to say. Don't try to shut anybody out, even if you disagree with them, even if you don't like what they have to say. Just be like, okay, that's interesting. Why do you think that?
I think, Brian, what you had to say there really triggered a question for me too that I'll pose out to the group, but just kind of an internal thing as far as how these events have actually affected any of you specifically. You know, has there been, I know, and especially on the brink of COVID starting and, you know, social distancing and social media impact and how it's just kind of run rampant. You know, when we think about it individually for you all, and maybe I can start with you, Abram, has there been a significant or any sort of impact on you just from a mental or emotional standpoint, with regards to these different, you know, things that have taken place, maybe even specifically with the Capitol or just some other things that are current events that are going on?
I have acknowledged the fact that it has made me depressed, but I'm being very candid now. Just being Black in America has made me depressed a lot, for all the perceived social injustices. But growing up, it's, again, not surprised, but understanding that I've been very fortunate to live in and have parents that said, you know, you don't want to just be right, you want to do what's right. And I've always lived that and try to understand someone's perspective, not and being able to sit down and talk to them. And when you get to know them, I can't tell you how many times someone says, oh, you're different. You're different than the other Blacks I've ever met. And I have to say, no, how many do you know? Oh, I only know you. It's that type of thing, getting to open the door. If I'm uncomfortable in a meeting or with someone, then I'm in the right place. I always want to be challenged. I always want to respect them, but I insist that they respect me. Personally, being in a city of San Ramon that has less than 2% African American and being their mayor, it was interesting and challenging being stopped by the police and all of a sudden realize I'm your mayor and you're stopping me for driving by being Black. But understanding it, sitting down and taking those guys out for a drink and saying, okay, let's talk about why did you stop me? Why do you, and it's the same thing that we have to do as veterans because we understand the camaraderie. And we're all the same when we bleed. We're all the same when we cry. And that's why I think veterans are so important because we understand that. There's no race, religion, or anything else in a foxhole when you're scared that that's your life. And that's what we have to, that's my role as a veteran, to let people know that, yeah, we are different. And you come to my home on Thanksgiving or Christmas, it looks like the UN. And that to me that's the United States. We have Democrats, Republicans, Muslims, Jews, everyone that's a part of the family. And that's what we have to be able to do. And it's difficult because we all have our prejudice and we have to understand that and try to overcome that. And that's hell for me, trying to overcome, quote, stupidity.
Yeah.
But you have to get around that.
Absolutely appreciate that perspective. And thank you for your transparency there as well. Adam, I know you've got something you'd like to share with us as well.
Yeah, no, I absolutely do. And Abram, you know, I do want to thank you as well because that was pretty powerful, no doubt. You know, in my area where I live and work, it's been kind of daunting. You know, it's extremely rural, and we've started to see, you know, various protests and stuff from over the summer, which was new. It got out to rural ranching towns where they didn't know what to do.
Yeah.
to be quite honest. And so there are counter protests because you're always going to have that other side. And with the population that my office for my work that we serve, try and get the right information out there, whether it be for COVID or for all the other issues as well. Just trying to discuss it and have that good conversation. It's been really difficult. So taking that step back and knowing what you can control, what you can't control, how you can affect people or not. You really got to take a good look at that. Otherwise, you're going to get sucked up into the mess, and your own mental health is going to be at risk. And that's the last thing you want. I know for us, it's been very difficult, even for myself at times. But keeping that analysis going constantly has been very, very helpful. Yeah, it's definitely very different from rural or from all over the U.S. It's interesting to hear different perspectives.
Yeah, thank you both for sharing. And if I could just share a little bit, I think over the past 12 months, a lot of what's gone on, not only COVID, but the death of George Floyd and subsequent protests and the events related to the election have built up a lot of pressure mentally. And at times I felt very anxious. So I know that maybe some of you have been feeling something like that. And at times this has been a little overwhelming, which is interesting because we've all dealt with a lot of stress at times in combat. And Mike, I want to come back to you because you're most recently discharged, or I should say newly retired out of the military. So do any of these events that have occurred in the United States over the past 12 months, does any of this change your view of your military service?
No, not my military service, but I think what I was struggling with was to figure out what is my role now. I mean, it was for years, 25 years, I had a fairly clearly defined role. This is what I do. I could set the command climate. I had resources, for this kind of stuff, whether it was equal opportunity and all that sort of thing. I had tools and resources, and then I had my command philosophy that was part of supporting, the right way of doing things, right? So in accordance with the policies and that type of thing. Coming out of the military, suddenly, what do I do? And I found that they do need us to lead. People look to us to lead, right? And I'm finding that in the work environment. After the Capitol riot, we made a statement collectively, brought the team together, and our statement condemning the violence and asking for unity and all that sort of thing was non-biased. It was non-partisan. Came out to the organization, and we beat the executive team to making that statement. So I think it's been, how do I lead? How do I make a positive difference? Rather than like getting sucked into some silly debate where you want to prove yourself right or want to show somebody that they're wrong. It's like, no, how do we lead? How do we make a difference in a positive way? Sometimes that requires listening, sometimes it requires doing, but I think that's kind of been my challenge is how do I maintain that positive leadership? How do I bring that positive leadership into this environment? So yeah, that has caused some anxiety and some stress, but I've just been asking people, like, what should I, what do you think? And then you'll find, and I believe we all might have similar experiences, we will find that these, if we maintain that attitude of like, hey, I want to make a difference in a positive way, I think those opportunities will present themselves and we can go about and do that. And people will be very grateful for our involvement.
Yeah,
Mike, you're totally right on that, because having a conversation, I've always found when you have a conversation with someone, it's an equal basis when you're trying to prove you're right or wrong. So I always try to have a conversation, and because you learn so much when you're not trying to prove a point.
Great statement there. I couldn't echo that any louder. Couldn't echo that any louder. Nathan, what do you got for us?
It's a good time, I think, to shift this show to our third segment. So when we come back, our panel will look to the future and what we can do to dial down the temperature and find common ground with each other as Americans. We'll be right back.
See these hands? They grip the wheel of a Humvee in Afghanistan.
These hands? 6 years treating soldiers.
12 years flying choppers.
My hands? They're here for the person who fought in Afghanistan. I made the call and got support for my sister.
My hands are here for the person who treated those soldiers. I helped connect my son with the care he's earned.
Mine take care of the person who flew those helicopters. And if life gets overwhelming, they're ready to dial the Veterans Crisis Line.
The Veterans Crisis Line is here for all veterans and their loved ones. Call 1-800-273-8255 and press 1 or chat online at veteranscrisisline.net.
Welcome back to a special Veterans Voices Town Hall meeting. We are continuing this very important conversation about unity, division, and where we go from here. So this is our last segment, and I think this has been a very important conversation so far about what's taken place and how it's affected us. And I really appreciate how this group has shared their own thoughts and opinions, and at times even disagreed. And I think that shows our ability to disagree while still showing the ability to understand. I want to focus on the future here. And Steve, I want to ask this question from you first. What should we expect over the next 4 years? And what can we do as a nation to reduce our political divisiveness during that time?
I'm optimistic about the next 4 years in the future. I think the primary thing that I personally would like to see is a return to rational dialogue in the White House and Congress. Mike was talking about leadership before. Military people are often looked for leadership. We look to the head of our government for leadership, and I'm sorry to say that it's been very disappointing in the past 4 years. There seemed to be a constant approach to stir things up every day, which just, in my mind, helped divide the country more than anything. The last 30 days, for me anyway, has been much more calming, much more rational. We went through a trial, an impeachment. It's over. But on the weekends, the news is relatively quiet. We're hearing about COVID, which is actually our number one problem. It should have been our number one problem in the last year anyway. Now we're hearing about that, and we're not hearing tidbits and things that are tearing people apart. And I think the lack of stirring the pot is the single biggest thing. And if citizens individually, whether they're veterans or not, can contact their congressmen, their senators, their elected representatives and say, this is the kind of dialogue we would like to see. We are tired of listening to the intense bitterness that has really split the country. And anyway, that's my view at this point.
Yeah, thanks for sharing, Steve. Others thoughts and opinions on what we can hope for the next 4 years and how we can reduce political divisiveness in the nation. Zach, you got your hand up?
Yeah. I hope we don't start any new wars in the next 4 years. I'd like to see us stop bleeding and dying on foreign soil. For pick a reason. That was something that hasn't been done. That was something that the former president didn't get us engaged in. Sure, I hope for a return to civility, but what actually is that? A place where we don't talk over each other or work to prove each other wrong. I just wish people would put more thought into what they speak. That's what I hope for.
Yeah, thanks, Zach. Brian, and then I think Mike.
So one thing that I'm actually kind of worried about is that I think former President Donald Trump has really changed the way politics is handled in the United States. He has challenged the almost sacrosanct kind of methodology that the president is supposed to obtain, and he has challenged the Electoral College. He's challenged Congress. He has challenged, he's even used social media to his advantage. I think you're going to see more and more people using that. I hope there's a return to rationality. I hope there is. I really do. But I think it's going to take work. It's not going to happen overnight. It's going to be a lot of people arguing. And I think what people have to be comfortable with is returning to this idea that you're not going to be comfortable in a democracy. Democracy isn't about getting your way. Democracy is about sometimes acquiescing. In fact, most of the time it's about acquiescing. And if we want to live in a democracy and a republic, we have to understand that first and foremost. So I think if people want to do that, I think people need to learn about like parliamentary process or parliamentary procedure. Like you have to learn how to talk to Congress. You have to learn to talk to your local government. You have to learn to talk to people. Use your vote. Use your voice. Don't use violence, right? One thing that was we kind of talked about in a little bit was justification of these protesters, right? I firmly believe that they think that they're in the right. They believe that their voice didn't matter and they had to use violence. I firmly believe they thought that. There was rumors that they were building gallows outside of the like actual working gallows outside of the Capitol. Maybe they were going to kidnap people and then they were going to detain them and then maybe they were going to do a trial and hang them. Who knows? But again, that's a rumor. We don't know everything about that. But the idea that they were going to do that to elected officials, right? These people are citizens, right? These people are elected officials. Vote them out of office. Don't use violence. And so I think people just need to calm down. I think people need to learn to debate again, actually debate. And I think people need to learn how to learn again. That's what I think needs to happen. And it's going to take work. It's going to be really, really hard. It's not going to be easy.
I agree. It will be difficult. It won't be easy. I don't think anything that we've constructed in this country based on our history has been easy. So I think that we're a part of history right now. Mike, I think you had something to add.
Yeah, those critical thinking skills are vital that everyone is mentioning, right? So it's not what to think, it's how to think. And there's too much, whether you're in a college classroom or whether I'm meeting with some people that just want to say, here's a PowerPoint presentation on what a racist is. And there are and this is fact, right? You are a racist if this, and this, and you're looking at this thing going, are you looking for my feedback or an opinion? It's like, no, if you deny this, then you are I think in this particular thing that I was looking at was a covert racist, right? If you dare even question it. So those types of discussions are not helpful. I think those are common in a lot of our universities and in our public forums where there's this desire, like we've said before, to label, and that is not just something that we saw in the last 4 years. That has been brewing for quite some time. These divides take time to build, and it's been building over time for probably my belief. This is just my opinion. About 30 years, this has been growing and getting worse steadily over time. And our adversaries are watching, and they're actually quite excited about it. China, Iran, and Russia are very, very happy to see this happening because their situations in those countries are far more desperate than we could ever imagine. So seeing us have these issues is a huge win for them, and they're going to continue to exploit that, and that's where it gets dangerous. So I think this has been brewing for a little while. We're going to have to lead us here with these conversations that we're having right now. That's not the norm, right? We're not normal right now. It seems like it's very normal that we can have a discussion and disagree on a couple things, agree on a couple things, but come out with a problem-solving methodology that's fairly straightforward and common sense. Question your sources, Listen to what others have to say, especially if those you might disagree with them. That seems very common sense, but it's not, and that's not how people are communicating in our Congress, our levels of government. That's not how they're communicating. They're communicating the same way that you see some of your friends or not so friends in our social media, where you take that social media time warp, right? You open up your Facebook and you go back to the days when you were an immature 5-year-old, sort of like a time warp experience, I guess, for some people. And that's how a great deal of people communicate, and that's fairly frightening. And I unfortunately think it's probably going to get a little worse before it gets better. Not to be the doomsday guy, but I'm not all that positive in the outlook here in the near future.
I know, as Nathan alluded, it'll definitely be difficult as we kind of go through this transition with the changing of hands and leadership, and just kind of the transition as a whole in our country after these types of events happen. So, Dre, want to hear from you. Want to hear you weigh in on this as well, ma'am.
Right on. So I think, just like Steve said, that I'm optimistic about the next 4 years. But I think one thing that I hope comes out of this is unity. Just like Nathan said in the beginning of this broadcast, was, how do we become united again? How do we, form a strong nation as we were before, from the inside out? And I think the current administration, has stood on that promise, or stood on that hope since the inauguration of, we're going to be reunited, we're going to, form back together. So I'm looking forward to action that is actually going to make, or start the process of the unity. Talk is cheap, actions speak louder than words. So what are the actions behind those words? How are we going to be united again? What does it mean for all Americans, policies for all Americans that can be benefited? So I think that's what I'm looking forward to the most, is just seeing what actions are truly taken to step in the right direction of being united again.
Absolutely. Very well said. Abram, it looked like you had your hand raised. I want to give you an opportunity to speak as well.
Right. To differ a little bit, I guess I'm optimistically pessimistic about what's going on in the next couple of years. I think we have to remember that and remind our elected officials, yes, they have the position, but we have the power. And we have to understand that. We have to, the peaceful going out and voting, letting people understand and making it transparent about who's voting, and the fact that we are debating whether whether someone has gone through the process and has been elected or not, that's that negativism that's there. We have to remind our elected officials that we expect them to be the adults in the room, and they are not. When you have to argue whether or not you want to carry a gun into the Capitol building and justify that, that's ludicrousy. And the fact is, as a Republican, I'm proud of the 7 people who, whether I agree or disagree, that voted their conscience, and we have to respect that. And we have to support them, whether we agree or disagree.
Instead of name calling, right? And labeling. Yes. Exactly.
Yes.
Adam, it seemed like you might have had something to say too. I saw you shaking your head there. Did you have anything you wanted to add?
No, I was agreeing a lot with, with everything being said. Just like I'm optimistic. I want to give the current administration a chance. It can only get better from here. From what happened in January, it can only get better. Looking forward and supporting our leadership, having previously worked for a congressman, I know the struggles that they face, and I mean they're busy. There's no two ways about it, whether they are in district or if they're in DC. They're busy people, and yeah, if we get a chance, now's the time to kind of hit that reset button a little bit and support them and just let them know that that's what we want. We want good things to happen, and just that's what I'm hoping for in the legislature.
Yeah, now is an important time, and I really like what Abram said in regards to what to expect of our elected officials and what to remind them of, that they hold the responsibility, but we hold the power. And with that, I want to introduce a new question here in regards to what would you, what actions can you personally take to support causes that you feel are important, and what opportunities do you feel exist for you to hold some type of public office? I think I'd like to come back to Steve on this.
I think the biggest thing we can all do in terms of personal actions is stay informed about what the issues are. And I would just go back to seek out multiple sources of information, including those that diverge from your normal opinions, and think about what's going on and communicate with your elected representatives. There's another phrase for a lot of groups use is think globally, act locally. I'm involved with a couple of local groups that try to support different issues for citizens, in our neighborhood, in our county. I'm retired now, so I'm probably not a likely candidate for a public office, but volunteering some time for the public good in general, I think, is something that each person can do, and that's what I would recommend.
Brian, what about you in terms of being involved in causes that you feel are important, or even the potential of future public office?
Well, especially if you're going to school right now, for the veterans that are in school, definitely try to get involved in clubs, try to get involved in student government if you're interested in that. I definitely think it's important. I definitely think if you want to make change in a way that is peaceful. Yes, debate gets heated, but learn how to debate, learn how to prove a point, learn how to acquiesce your point too. One thing you learn in school, or what you should be learning, is how to concede your point. But you see a lot of people can't do that. If you're interested in public office, definitely go. If you're interested, learn how it works first. Don't just assume that, just because you have an opinion, just because you think something different, that it should just get done. I've noticed that a lot of people, even at the state level, even at the county level, right? They get in the office saying they're going to change all these great things, and they get in and they realize they don't have the funding. They realize they don't have it. So do your research, right? Get an internship, learn the lay of the land. Don't just assume you know. Personally, since I'm in student government right now at my school, I like it. I like the responsibility about it. I'm learning about parliamentary procedure. That's why I kind of talked about it before. But it is a procedure. You go to a town hall meeting. I'm sure that Abram can talk about this. People just start talking, thinking that they have the right to speak in that moment. You have a right to speak, but you have to give people a chance, right? You can't just dominate the conversation, right? And that's something that happens all the time. So if you're interested in that, I'm kind of a little bit interested in that, but I want to probably start at the local level. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to start at a local level.
Very good. Yeah, that relates to what Steve said earlier. Think globally, act locally. We just have about a minute now. Final thoughts in regards to how we can support our causes and even take a role in political offices. Dre, I'm going to come back to you.
So I think education, get educated, educate yourself on our history, our current events, and if you want to make changes, start from yourself first and work your way out. Like Brian said, just start locally at the lower level and get involved. If you see there's an opportunity for change and you have that idea, or you have an idea that can be pitched, pitch it, go with it. If you feel like this can impact your community, impact your school, get involved. Don't just sit back and ride the wave, on everybody else's efforts and still have an opinion. There's one thing that I've always been taught: if you don't vote, then you don't have an opinion. So do yourself do yourself some good and get involved. That way you have an opinion, you have something to, just a firm foundation to stand on, But I think education is key, and not just to be educated, but apply your education to those areas that need it the most, the changes that need to be made, the communities that are going to be impacted, your local schools, local churches, whatever it is. So I think just stay educated.
Yeah, thank you,
Absolutely.
everyone. And Erin, I'm going to toss it to you.
Yeah.
What would you like to see over the next 4 years, and how do you think you'll support causes that you think are important? And you're active duty in the military right now, but what's the future like for you in any type of political office?
I absolutely want to see more unified fronts happening. The fact that we've unfortunately dealt with so much division is very shameful and hurtful in a lot of ways. But I will tell you, I'm naturally an optimistic person, so my hope is that we can absolutely become a lot more unified. I will tell you my personal approach to it, because of the type of person that I am. I am very big on having real conversations, the uncomfortable kind, the kinds that, people shy away from because they are afraid to have their voices heard. But I want to always be in a position, and fortunately for me, being in leadership in the military, I get to spearhead and open up those environments for people to feel safe, to have those kinds of conversations. Because I think when we do things like that, we allow people to, I feel like that's how we grow together as people. We can learn to respectfully disagree, but at least the voices are being heard. So it's very huge for me. I'm excited to see what the next few years will look like, with my hope and prayer that we will become a lot more unified as a nation once again, and be that great powerhouse that we know that this country can be. So with that being said, I am so incredibly grateful for this conversation today. This has been great discussion. I really appreciate all of our guests that have come on today to openly share your viewpoints of the things that have taken place here, current events recently, and specifically with the January 6th U.S. Capitol event. So the goal of our panel discussion tonight was to shed some light on how veterans feel about the current state of discord in our country. Veterans Voices is dedicated to using its voice, this platform, to improve the lives of those who have served. Thank you. Have a good evening.
Thank you for tuning in to the show tonight. We hope you have enjoyed this special Veterans Voices Town Hall meeting. We leave you with some resources for veterans. The Veterans Crisis Line helps veterans in need 24 hours a day. You can always talk with someone who understands. Call 800-273-8255 and press 1. Vet centers provide a wide range of social services and help veterans in transition. Find a vet center near you at vetcenter.va.gov or call 877-WAR-VETS. That's 877-927-8387. Your County Veteran Service Office is the place to start for any questions you have about your service or benefits. Find your CVSO at cacvso.org. The USS Hornet Museum is hosting a Vietnam conflict photo exhibit in recognition of Vietnam War remembrance. See it on weekends from March 27th to April 4th. To learn more, go to uss-hornet.org. Veterans Voices is brought to you in part by contributions from the Veterans Affordable Home Program, serving those who have served us, ensuring the American dream for our veterans. The Diablo Valley Veterans Foundation, dedicated to helping veterans near you. To rewatch tonight's episode, check back on our homepage later this week or check your cable provider's schedule for rebroadcast times. You can also rewatch this episode and many others on our YouTube channel, Veterans Voices of Contra Costa. So be sure to subscribe. Our next show will air on Monday, April 12th at 7 p.m. We will talk about suicide prevention. Be sure to tune in. To all of our veterans and their families, thanks for watching and have a great evening.